So, the meaning of life is based on the premise that life has meaning under any circumstance, and meaning is unconditional. So, meaning can be encountered in three ways, which are clustered into three groups of values. So, creative, i.e., what we give to the world, experiential, i.e., what we take from the world, and attitudinal, i.e., the position we take towards unavoidable circumstances. Now, this is where I touch upon elaborating a bit more on the attitudinal values. So I'll pop a diagram up on the screen. In the creative and experiential domains, an individual is moving in the horizontal plane, in which the positive pole is success and its negative pole is failure. These are partially prone to external factors that we can't control. The perpendicular plane relates to the third way in which meaning can be encountered, and that is in our attitude. A perpendicular plane whose positive pole is fulfillment and negative pole is despair. Only we are responsible for where we wish to sit on this perpendicular plane. It's independent of the hand that we are dealt with in life. And it's just highlighting that even in the worst given circumstances, it is still entirely possible to see purpose in them. And in doing so, using the suffering we're experiencing to strengthen our resilience. Now, it was Nietzsche who first said, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." Now, the emphasis in logotherapy is empowering the individual to rise above. It's acknowledging the limitations, but at the same time, emphasizing that choice is still available. And that even in the most dire situations, which devoid us of the choice to change them, we still choose our attitude towards them. So now we've touched upon the values, I want to kind of address the approach to the concept of meaning in logotherapy. There's no denial that it's possible to identify the meaning of our life as a whole. However, what is more of a concern is the potential meaning present in any single situation, what we refer to in logotherapy as the meaning of the moment. Now, the reason for this is probably best described using an example from Frankl himself, where we can liken our life to a film. Each scene in a film is purposeful, and it carries its own individual meaning. And it's only after observing the last sequence and understanding the meaning behind the sequences before it is it possible to grasp the meaning of the film as a whole. So in a way, in logotherapy, meaning is approached in a slightly more pragmatic way. It's becoming aware of the possibility of a given situation on the background of its current reality. So, put simply, meaning is defined as what is meant. We're pushed by drives or instincts and pulled by meanings and values. And so it should be emphasized that meaning cannot be given, but it instead must be found. And in any given situation, we are free to either reject or accept the meaning it offers. And therefore, the actions we take in fulfilling the demands of it. Hopefully actions that coincide with our own unique values. So we split values into universal values, otherwise known as traditions, and unique values. Now, universal values or traditions are those that are shared by human beings across societies and situations. Now, unique values are those values that pertain to a specific individual in a specific situation. Also unique to the individual is the hierarchy of values that person gives to any given situation. That is the emphasis that individual decides to place on differing values when considering a decision. Traditions are useful in that they can spare us from laborious decision making in typical situations, almost providing a manual. The flaws, however, that lie in the fact that by nature they are very broad. And so in more complicated situations where one or more universal values appears to collide with one another, we experience value collisions. So in making choices here, we rely on a refined ability to place conflicting values in a hierarchy that is unique to us, as well as a refined ability to find or even act on our own unique values. So for this, we need to possess the full capacity of our conscience. And when I speak of conscience here, I'm talking specifically of our ability to intuitively search for meaning, i.e. thinking for ourselves, which is becoming increasingly rare. Now, as opposed to the one-size-fits-all approach that traditions offer, Conscience is fluid in that it molds to any given situation. But to adapt, it must purposely create. And so it's not a blind process. In fact, the very point that conscience collides with traditions of society is the very point that new ideas are created. An interesting side note is that it's actually a very common collision for those who have more creative personality types, those who are prone to sitting on the edge or the boundary somewhat. I mean, this can often lead to a lot of misdirection. A good example of that, just look up Kanye West on YouTube. I mean, but also importantly, it leads to a lot of creation and innovation. And, again, testament to that. It's just creative personality types are more prone to sitting on that particular edge. But we all stumble across it at time to time, and it's becoming more prevalent now. So the reason it's becoming more prevalent is because I feel like we're living in a time of, crumbling traditions, where the universal values that constitute these traditions are not being replaced. And the increasing prevalence of aimlessness, although also a consequence of technology, is also due to the fact, I think, that this aimlessness was previously shielded by the customs of traditional society. So in the modern age, where traditional requirements are losing their unconditional validity, our sense of purpose relies greatly on the intuitive capacity of our conscience. The how to think, as opposed to just solely the what, is now not really an option. We also stumble into another problem here, which is provoked by our instant access to mass media platforms. We are now seamlessly bombarded with a wealth of options, offering numerous possibilities, but also a sea of conflicting opinions. And so most of us often feel as if we're in a constant state of becoming, without belonging. And as well as being unpleasant, the constant path shifting often results in mediocrity. Now, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. Again, the capacity of our conscious decision making is the only tool we have to protect ourselves in filtering the vast amounts of possibilities now promised to literally anybody with a smartphone. And when emphasizing here the importance of making individual choices as opposed to kind of blindly following customs, I'm not implying that conscience isn't susceptible to error, but it is the conviction in logotherapy that the possibility of error does not dispense us from the necessity of trial, and that it's entirely possible to be both half sure and wholehearted at the same time. So the meaning of the moment has to be found, and the crumbling of traditions further emphasizes the active role we have to play as individuals in order to find it. Now, on speaking about our points of reference when making decisions, I feel like it'd be incomplete if I didn't acknowledge the tools that technology is now offering. Now, I spoke of the decreasing role tradition now plays, but it seems to me that traditions are now being replaced by algorithms, which, thankfully as it stands, are only capable of making generic decisions, as far as I'm aware. The point of friction, and sadly the source of a lot of suffering for most of us, is that choices that cannot be made via these means. The kind of decisions where data and evidence are of very little value. And the standard decision-making tools are either ineffective or they mislead us. These are decisions that we face all the time, such as whether to get married, to whom, children, career, whatever it may be, is where the generic information or algorithms are of, little benefit. And these big decisions in life ultimately define us, and they're the source of a lot of our pain and joy. It saddens me, but medicine and psychotherapy are becoming increasingly blind to this, to the subjective nature of conscious experience, and I understand why, but reducing its approach down to what can be measured. Measuring its efficacy on quantifiable data, which is much less respondent to the qualitative nature of human experience. The important realization here, I think, is that scientific discovery and, evidence-based techniques, they're such useful tools, and more useful in certain specialities. They're useful tools that help explain and model reality, but they don't define it. And so for any approach to be beneficial, it has to avoid the common pitfalls of reducing the human being down to the incomplete psychological and physiological process we have managed to prove so far. And it needs to account for the human being in its totality. And it's this which is the core of logotherapy. So briefly, logotherapy is a therapeutic approach founded by Viktor Frankl in the 1930s. And it's based on the premise that our primary motivation for life is a search for meaning. Now, its effectiveness lies in its comprehensive incorporation of psychiatry, philosophy, psychology, and physiology. This video has been a gross overview of the theoretical basis of logotherapy, and specifically the three triads. And in a separate video, I'll go on to discuss the clinical application of logotherapy. And I'll do this by expanding on the therapeutic tools that it uses. So that wraps it up. If you have any questions, or even that you want to know more about anything that I've spoken about, then of course just drop a comment down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.